the packaging has two aspects. The first being that from a mechanical perspective, they need to be workable from a number of perspectives. They need to be easy to open, particularly if you're looking at presenting to an age population, or depending on your target market, or healthcare or children or whatever it is. You need to make sure that mechanically and physically that your packaging is easy to manage. The next thing is design. And this is really what has made a big difference for me over the 5 years. What started as I actually dug out some old samples of my packaging. I started with Dalicious, which was that was my original Dal range. I went for the pouches, the stand-up pouches, for a number of reasons, because they give great shelf presence for your product. So you're getting good brand presentation on shelf. From a perspective of production, for me, I work on a hot fill process, so that packaging product works for me too. But design wise, that was the first iteration, but unfortunately I hadn't thought very far beyond that to what happens if I want to do another range, right? So and it's not Dal, so then what do I do? So basically I then rebranded with a number of brand names, which was Dalicious, and then I did Veggielicious, and a Mexican range. And whilst it was nice, what I allowed myself to be led by was people who I thought knew better than me.
Hi Nicole, how are you?
Hey, nice to see you.
Same here. How is it?
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Really appreciate your time, Nicole. From your busy schedule, it is really appreciable that you are on this chat show today.
Yes, that's no problem at all. It's the end of the day here, so no problem. I've locked the doors, and I mean, a lot of us, I think, are working from home now, so I've locked the doors to keep all the children and the dogs out, so we're all good to go.
Awesome. Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to the new episode of Sustainable Future Food Talk. Today we have with us Nicole Mahler from Australia. Nicole is the CEO and founder of Vegan Made Easy. Her entrepreneurial journey began 5 years ago when she was in her mid-40s. After a successful corporate career, she decided to create a business that combined her passion for food, corporate marketing skills, and great work flexibility to get that right work-life balance. Her journey began on a stovetop with an inspiration to create a range of products that were plant-based and support her two daughters' desire to be vegan. For Nicole and her beautiful team, it is all about sharing the love of good food and to make choosing plant-based healthy meals easy. So Nicole, I mean, really inspirational journey. Really appreciate your time once again.
Pleasure. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So it all started on my stovetop at home, because mid-40s and ladies here in Australia, it's a bit tricky to re-enter the workforce, and I didn't want to jump back to corporate life, so food has always been my passion. And I was so lucky that a beautiful Indian lady called Anita Patel taught me how to make dal, and I saw a business opportunity there and a real gap in the market for vegan food offerings 5 years ago. I was a little bit ahead of my time, I have to say, for the Australian market. The word vegan still had quite negative connotations, but things have moved very swiftly forward since then.
Right.
Yeah.
So, of course, I mean, you have now spread your brand across various territories. So what are those key questions which every retailer asks when considering your product for their stores?
Most of the retailers, when they're considering your brand, or once you approach and identify the right person, I mean, that's half the battle, right? To make sure that you get the decision maker, which is always the way in sales, no matter what. There's three things really that the retailers are looking for before they have you on shelf. Usually they ask you to complete a new line form, which is something that lists all of your product details, your ingredients, your packaging size, your shelf life, your carton configurations, your barcodes, to make sure that they're all up to standard. And some of the retailers here also require that you don't have preservatives of certain nature in your product. So depending on how stringent they are. So basically the first approach is to provide them with all of that technical information about your product. The second thing usually follows from that is to supply samples to the retailer so that they can get a feel for your product and taste it, which hopefully you've already made sure it tastes good, right?
Yeah.
So that's usually the next step. And from my perspective, you can never give away enough free product. It's the cheapest marketing dollar you'll ever spend. If your product is good and you have faith in it and it's been tested, then give it away. The more people that try it, spreads the word and also expands your opportunities. So free samples is the next stop, and to make sure that what you provide the buying teams at retailers to make sure that your product samples are perfect and they look great, and also a personal touch often helps, because as most of us know, that it's those relationships with those decision makers as buyers in those categories that are crucial. And really you're looking to create a situation where they become a brand ambassador for you on your behalf and really support your journey and that they buy a story. So there's a bit of a move here in Australia, and I think around the world, that with people looking for a more authentic presentation of product, that the more personalized the story, I think the more success and the more support that you gain along the way. The third thing that retailers are looking for usually is a proven track record for your product. I started out at doing home delivery from Facebook orders, and that got out of hand, and then and market stalls and that kind of thing. And I think with hundreds of people trying your product, you really you're putting yourself out there and really making sure that what you're going to market with is something that the people want, people like, that they're going to purchase. So I think those track records also help, even if they're small. It does help the larger retailers get a feel for your try to buy ratio. So I always attempted to work out how many people try it versus how many people buy it, and we were consistently, and still do, achieve over 83%, between 83 and 86% try to buy ratio, which is very high. So that gives them confidence to give your product a try, which is great. So that's the three things basically that they're looking for, which is, get them the information, get them the samples, and prove that your product sells. That's the three things.
Awesome. Great. So coming down to my next question, of course, your brand also focuses a lot on packaging. Around what should the kind of packaging which you have created. So how important is it to have that right packaging, and what points should be considered from the standpoint of customers? What are the customers looking for?
Okay, well, that has been probably the biggest learning curve of my food business, because I had never run a food business before I started this, right? So, it's learn as you go along, which I think is the case for a lot of people. But the packaging has two aspects. The first being that from a mechanical perspective, they need to be workable from a number of perspectives. They need to be easy to open, particularly if you're looking at presenting to an age population, or depending on your target market, or healthcare, or children, or whatever it is. You need to make sure that mechanically and physically that your packaging is easy to manage. The next thing is design, and this is really what has made a big difference for me over the 5 years. What started as I actually dug out some old samples of my packaging. I started with Delicious, which was that was my original Dhawal range. I went for the pouches, the stand-up pouches, for a number of reasons, because they give great shelf presence for your product. So you're getting good brand presentation on shelf. From a perspective of production, for me, I work on a hot fill process, so that packaging product works for me too. But design wise, that was the first iteration, but unfortunately I hadn't thought very far beyond that to what happens if I want to do another range, right? So and it's not Dhawal, so then what do I do? So basically I then rebranded with a number of brand names, which was Delicious, and then I did Veggielicious and a Mexican range. And whilst it was nice, what I allowed myself to be led by was people who I thought knew better than me, and we all put some trust in people who know branding and that kind of thing. And I feel that I was led perhaps, or pushed down a path that wasn't really representative of my brand, but I thought they knew better, right?
Sure.
Because I was paying them a lot of money.
Right.
So what I ended up with was fine, and it certainly my business grew as a result of moving into the new packaging, but also expanding the range. Because if you've got a product that's doing well in the space, then negotiating with your retailers to expand your offering is an obvious way to improve your bottom line, right? So I went from 3 products to now 9 products on shelf in the range, and most retailers stock all 9. So all of a sudden it's tripled the turnover from that perspective. So I figure if you're on a good thing and you have good following, then keep working on that. But then most recently I rebranded again, and this, I promise, is the last time. And I changed my entire name and everything. So now I'm Vegan Made Easy, and my pouches are like a rainbow. So this is my, there's
looks very nice.
Beautiful colors, and with the photography still playing an important role. So the reason I thought that the market was ready for the Vegan Made Easy was, the maturity of the word vegan and the plant-based space. I thought that it was time to actually call my product what it is, and that's making vegan easy for everyone, and not necessarily being limited exclusively to a vegan consumer, but beyond that to all this, the biggest growing market, which is the flexitarian, being people that might just say, oh, I don't eat meat on a Monday, and a bit confused about that. So I do believe that now my branding has a very strong call out, one that is embraced by consumers now. I think the color coding of the different flavors makes it simpler for consumers to say, oh, I like the green one's my favorite, and that kind of thing. So and also now that I'm under Vegan Made Easy, I can expand or contract the range dependent on performance. And if I wanted to add some Asian flavors, then I could easily do so under the Vegan Made Easy brand name. So that's been a really big journey. And what else have I got here? That's just it. I chose the pouch because my process and these pouches allowed me a very long shelf life. So mine's a chilled product. It's a refrigerated display. So I needed to maximize my shelf life. And now I get 15 weeks on shelf, which is fantastic for a product that is fresh. And it doesn't require, I attempted the retorting process to make it shelf stable, but it actually ruined my product, as it does have a tendency to do, and I wasn't prepared to compromise the recipes to suit that process. I felt that 15 weeks, if I can't sell something in 15 weeks, there's something wrong, right?
Right.
So the branding from a packaging perspective had those aspects. And then the last thing that is becoming more and more important in the retail sector with products such as this is sustainability.
Correct.
And the choice of materials. So unfortunately, because of my manufacturing process, I'm not able to use any other materials than what I have now in these pouches. So I've just made sure that I have a very clear call out on back regarding them being soft plastic recyclable, so that they can be rinsed and recycled at numerous retail outlets where you can take your soft plastics. That's where we're at in Australia. I know that Europe is far in advance of that and are demanding much more stringent packaging guidelines. But at the moment with my process, it's the best practice that I can achieve at the moment.
Right.
And it's very cost effective. Pouches, they're very cost effective. In fact, I print these in India.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So that's branding. If your brand has to work very hard on shelf. You can't be there, and you have to be able to step back, and your brand has to speak for you, and your brand is what drives sales. You have to get the people's attention. It is everything, aside from it being a good product, right?
Right.
But going on and growing, your packaging is everything.
Right.
If you have really bad packaging, you're just not going to sell. And retailers, I don't know about other countries, but here in Australia, for example, I'm stocked in Woolworths and Coles, and so they have a minimum what they like to set as a benchmark, and they require that you sell 4 units per SKU per store per week, which sounds low.
Yeah, it sounds low.
And it sounds low, but I suppose you've got to look at it in the context of our smaller market here and that kind of thing. But I've been able to achieve that, which is great, and that's allowed for expansion into more retail outlets. But branding's everything. Making sure you get that right and take your time with it. Make sure you're sure about it and that you test it. That's the other thing that I did. I went out to just organically using Facebook groups of consumers that my brand was connected with. And so I'd ask them, I'd say, what do you think? This is my old one, this is my new one. What are your thoughts? And the feedback that I got from hundreds of responses was so helpful. And I believe that contributed to, really something that I wouldn't change a thing now.
Awesome. Really such a detailed response, and the kind of packaging that your brand has also evolved with is phenomenal. So, I mean, it is evident with your packaging as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's an evolution process.
Yes, so coming down to my next question. So, I mean, with your extensive experience in retail and distribution, what tips do you have for a growing brand having, of course, a promising product portfolio and wishes to enter an international market, while selecting a distributor? And of course, since you have an extensive experience in Australia, so in that specific context, if you can give some tips.
Sure. Well, just regarding domestic distribution, I mean, it's a very large country, and I have a chilled product, so it's quite tricky and quite expensive to ship chilled product from one side, particularly from here to Western Australia, although I've started distributing there. So I guess I think locally it's actually finding the right distributor can sometimes, particularly distribution in the retail sector, can be really, really difficult finding a good match. And I've been through multiple distributors who have not performed, and I don't think it's not necessarily their fault or mine, but what I've learned is that it's important that your product is a good match for their offering. So I think it's important to identify a distributor that has a complementary suite of products to yours, that have experience in the chilled space, in my in my category. For other products, it might be, experience in the ambient Mexican category. Like I think it's finding people who have experience within those categories, and then partnering with them and supporting. Then you have to throw support behind that too, with social media and promotions and that kind of thing. And even, I mean, gosh, a few years ago, I was flying around, doing taste testings and events and things like that, just whatever I could do to gain a following in those different areas or different states, because of course you can't afford to hire a whole heap of people when you're starting out, right? So locally it's been about finding the right partner. And then, so I tend to sell into each state to a distributor, this is for the independent space. So I sell by the pallet to distributors, and then they put their margin on and distribute to stores. With the larger retailers, the larger Woolworths and Coles, who each have about 800 or 900 stores, they tend to be more of a supply direct, which is great because it's more profitable, and then they distribute from there. So you drop to a warehouse. So that tends to be that. So that's how it works here. I think it's important to mention that if you need to keep an eye on your distributors, and you really need to be on their game and in very regular contact with them to drive increases in stockists. And for me, it's about the relationships, right? So making sure that they understand that you are their partner in this journey, and you will do whatever it takes to support your brand rollout. And whether or not that be offering launch specials, it might be a free every fourth carton, or with 10 cartons you get a carton free, or a reduced price, or whether we like it or not, which I hate it, but it still remains a fact that reducing price is what drives particularly getting people to try it at the beginning, because consumers, if something has a special, an on sale ticket, then they're more likely to try it, right? So doing whatever you can to partner with them, and also to then do very geographically targeted social media ad placement if you're rolling out into a new region, to make sure you back that up with campaigns in that area to encourage people to go in store, identifying Facebook groups in those regions. And I mean, it's a convoluted task, but it's important to success and sustainability and growth. It's important. Growth. So that's the domestic market. From an international perspective, I'm yet to dip my toe into that ocean. But I'm got my eye on UK as my first international market. Because I operate under a subcontract manufacturing distribution model, it makes it very easy for me to pop my recipes in a suitcase and find, I mean, my product can be made in any country and theoretically rolled out in any country. So now that I've consolidated Australia as a market, I will next year be looking at identifying an appropriate subcontract manufacturer and appropriate distribution partners and retail partners in the UK as a starting point. And we'll see how that goes.
That sounds exciting, and wish you all the best for it.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I mean, yeah. And also I've got to say, I found that over the years that other business owners, if you're genuine and you also pay it forward yourself and help others, then when you ask a question of other business owners, I haven't had one business owner not provide me with the information. And for the most part, people are really supportive of entrepreneurs and startups and giving you a hand. When you're not in a competitive market, then people are helpful. You just have to
Right.
ask. And LinkedIn's fabulous for that. You can find anyone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is
And you just
incredible.
message them. I can't believe it. Like I message anyone.
Yeah,
Just to
yeah.
ask, you just say, hey, look, I'm just this person and I just got this question and I know I so admire what you've done and could you help? And everyone's so helpful. So I've
Right.
been very blessed with that.
And I mean, that's what the power of networking is, right? I mean, it really helps you connect well.
Yeah, exactly. And it also, and then I always make sure thank you and I ship them some samples and hey, you picked up another customer, worst case scenario, right?
Absolutely.
So and the more people that try it, more people buy it and they talk about it. Oh, she was a nice woman, try this, and that's all good.
Right. Right. So coming down to my next question, I mean, you have been into plant-based and vegan food space for quite some time now. So how do you foresee
Yeah.
changing food landscape of the Australian market with the penetration of course, the plant-based and vegan foods?
Yeah, wow. That's quite a big question. So how do retailers monitor, improve and develop categories? So I through innovations and private labels, I think is the question we're referring to. So I think each retailer has their own method of monitoring and developing the categories, and some are a bit further ahead than others. And it's really interesting because I work with the independents, but also the larger retailers, and it's been very interesting to watch the independents who have been able to be more responsive and more nimble and more innovative. And I've noted that their grasp and their success in the plant-based space has been something that now, interestingly, the larger players, the big chains, are now looking to how they've done it. And it's been a tricky thing for retailers, I think, to identify what on earth they're doing with the plant-based space. Do we put the plant-based meat and mince next to the dead animal mince, and there's the vegans that say no, but then there's the flexitarians that say yeah, of course, because that's where I look for meat. And so it's been a real, and I think it's still ongoing. It's still a struggle. I think they're slowly coming to understand that plant-based is enough of a category now that it really needs to stand alone and be a category on its own and have plant-based products. What I have noted is that the more successful retailers have separated plant-based now and put it into its own category, expanded it, and I think that that's probably going to be the direction that it goes, I would imagine. Here in Australia, interestingly, just at the moment, there's a court hearing about the Australian beef industry complaining and saying that plant-based and products should not be allowed to use animals, cows or chickens, or so if you're making a fake chicken meat, you shouldn't be allowed to have a chicken on your packaging. Like they're arguing that they've built the brand behind their own meat products, animal-based products, and the plant-based segment should not be allowed to use those icons, if you like. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out here, and whether or not there'll be any sort of laws that say, no, you can't have a cow or a chicken, or if it doesn't contain those things. It'll be, I don't know if they'll get away with it, but good on them for having a try. What it does indicate is the threat that the plant-based alternatives are presenting to the traditional meat markets. There's been a significant drop here in Australia, as there has been in markets around the world, and I guess they're feeling the pinch a little and starting to try and take action to stop it eroding their market share any further, I suppose.
So Nicole, coming down to my next question, how do retailers monitor, improve and develop categories through innovations and private labels?
Okay, well, a lot of the big boys are keeping an eye on the smaller players that are more progressive and more innovative and more flexible within that space. I work with a group of 25, it's only 25 stores, but they're so progressive. It's called Harris Farm Markets here in Australia. Aggressively expanding. They've really cornered that neighborhood vibe, that personalized, artisan, bespoke, that kind of feeling. And I've watched then the larger retailers then observing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and starting to, take away some of the aspects that they're using in Harris Farm. I started supplying them about 4 years ago, and they still are, even though I'm now supplying many, many more of the other retailers, they still are almost, they're my biggest customer, one of my biggest customers. And great margins because we supply direct. I don't have to go through a distributor.
Right.
But they're fantastic. But with Woolworths and Coles, what they've started to do, the big players, which I think is happening worldwide as a trend, is that back to the authenticity and the consumer's desire. And I think COVID has driven that as well. They are suspicious or not threatened by, but I think that people are wanting to support a smaller environment from a retail perspective and not the giants. I don't know. I've noticed that here in Australia. I don't know if that's the trend in other countries, but I suspect it may be. So what the Woolworths and Coles players have done in response to that is they have innovated and created. Coles have started opening what's called Coles Local, which are a smaller store with higher end. It's a different experience. There's a lot more fresh produce. It's more of that market vibe, and Woolworths are doing the same, although they've got their name all wrong. But anyway, I'm sure they'll sort that out. They're launching under the Woolworths Metro, which is the more corner store. But it's a name that I don't think the consumers are connecting with. So Coles Local are taking the lead because it's a great name, right? It's your local. Go to your local,
Yeah.
But there's also very high here. There's if you are a private label supplier to the large retailers, there's very high standards of certifications required. So here in Australia, we have the HACCP requirements that you must meet.
Yeah.
But once you do private label, then it goes beyond that to SQF, which is a much higher certification, which can be quite onerous on the manufacturing side and quite difficult to comply with, and expensive to comply with. So anyway, that's an area I haven't looked at yet.
Sure. Awesome. So coming down to my next question, how do you foresee the changing food landscape of the Australian market with the penetration of plant-based foods?
Well, Australia's, as we know, it's a small market, but per capita, we're very early adopters of new products and in whatever sector. So it tends to grow quite quickly. I was looking at some Roy Morgan research and trends recently, and they identified that the growing trend in vegetarian and vegan food consumption is still growing at above 10% per annum, and with approaching 15% of the population declaring themselves as vegetarian, which is really high. Not in a small market like ours, but I think that's reflected in larger populations around the developed world. And that's really aside from the flexitarian issue, the whole, dip your toe into vegan on a Monday kind of thing, which is an enormous opportunity that will see us as plant-based food producers really needing to have a think about how we present our message to that market, and because they don't necessarily have the same animal cruelty concerns, environmental concerns, although I do think that environmental concern is one that's, going to drive food choices a lot more quickly. But yeah, we've got to think of how it's, the negative connotations and the crazy hippie vibe that the plant-based and vegan space had has now become, more of an aspirational lifestyle choice, right? It's representing that, I'm much more environmentally and socially responsible and ethical, when I make these choices. So I think we have to embrace all of that. And in my mind, any meal that does not consume meat is a win, so veganism or making vegan choices I just want to make it easy for everyone. I'm not going to judge those that still choose to eat meat. I just want to make it easy for them not to, is my whole ethos. That is the entire ethos. I won't judge, just make it easy. Here, give it a try. So, and with Australia's meat consumption's at its lowest point in 25 years. I think I was referring to how they're a bit concerned at the moment because livestock prices have hit all-time highs, and we're moving towards more environmentally conscious dietary habits. So I think that will impact our sector much more significantly over time. So I guess, what am I doing to respond to these trends? I made a decision quite early in the piece that I wouldn't utilize any, I don't mean it derogatorily by saying fake meat, but I mean TVPs or soy-based, or I just decided to just stay in the vegetable space because that was just truer to my product range and my offering and me, and I kind of go with the whole nothing fake about me, nothing fake in my product kind of vibe, but it fits with my story, and I've picked my lane. My lane is steady as she goes, and with Generation Z, the young ones born 95 to 2015, I've noticed that they're demonstrating from a trend perspective that they have quite negative viewpoints on cultured meat, on man-made meat or plant-based meat. So they're avid back of the pack readers.
Yeah.
The ingredients list is,
absolutely.
Is everything. And so I think I've just tried to stay as clean as I can, and I want that everything on the back of my pack, when you read the ingredients list, is something that you recognize, what it is, you have it in your cupboard, you could make it yourself, but this is easier, that kind of thing. So that's my response to that growth, and I will stay very strictly in that lane of vegetable based only.
So coming down to my last question for this session. So, I mean, how much important is it to have the right branding at the retail stores? And if you can suggest a few innovative branding methods for the upcoming brands.
Well, I think I touched on how important it is earlier, but right branding is everything. If you're chasing volume and growth, that is the biggest impact you can have on your volume and growth, is branding. And I've tested that, it's only been 3 months, so 12 weeks since my new branding, and sales are up over 30% already. So it's been really interesting. And I haven't done any advertising yet. I haven't done new branding because I wanted clean data. I wanted to be able to measure it accurately with the same baseline and say, well, what the only difference is my new packaging, my new branding. And so that has proven to me that that can have a significant impact. But and unless you have super deep pockets and enormous budgets and lots of funding for advertising, which, some people do, and that's fantastic. I just haven't. I've done it the hard way. Oh my God, it's so hard. But
Oh,
anyway,
absolutely.
and then test, just test it, and not your friends, because they'll tell you it's good even when it's
Right.
shit.
Yeah. Yes.
So you have to test, and and test your packaging, your branding, test everything. Just ask, put it out there. People love giving an opinion, don't they?
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
a poll. Which one do you like? 1, 2, or 3? I did that through, when I was doing my branding for the new packaging. What do you like? What do you like about it? Do you like option 1, 2, or 3? Keep your options short, and people love looking at something pretty and going, oh, I like number 1. But in most cases, they'll say why they like it and what they don't like about the others, and that's so useful. So such a useful.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So quality feedback. And then, yes, I've talked to you about sales being up in response to my branding. So the right branding, again, can be measured. I've noticed I help a lot of other smaller brands, perhaps, that are just a little bit behind me back down the track, that haven't quite reached the scale that I have. And some people get really attached. They get so attached to their name or their, and oh gosh, I've heard some absolute shockers, like really bad. Bless. But they're just not prepared. You've got to be open. You can't have an ego about your brand to the extent that you won't respond to what it's all about what the market wants, what the consumer. Right. It doesn't matter what you want. I mean, yes, you can inject a personality and that kind of thing, but ultimately it's about what your consumers want. So don't kid yourself that you know better. You don't. Your consumers will buy it or won't buy it based on their feedback. So just don't get too attached. Like here I was, my company is Delicious Foods Australia, and my branding was Delicious Foods Australia. It's ridiculous. Why did I do that? I don't know. Anyway, I've moved on. But it means nothing. It doesn't say anything. Make sure your branding needs to be obvious and say something. If you want growth and volume, it has to. So really, that's my advice. The other thing I involved was my buyers. So my relationships with my category managers within the major supermarket chains. Now, I will always send them samples, or I'll say, what do you think? What do you like? So I, further to that, growing the relationship, I always involve them in the process.
Right.
And that way they'll turn to me if they have an innovation that they've been interested in. Like I've just released a range of vegan made easy pies, because my product is actually a perfect pie filling, right? And so, then they ask me they say, oh, can you release a new product? Like, yeah, sure. I can pull that together, and I just find a subcontract manufacturer and off I go. And, it all comes back down to relationships, doesn't it, really? In all aspects, actually, with your subcontract manufacturer, that has to be someone that you are sincerely partnering with, right. And that you work hard with them, that you've got checks and balances in place. Some people, I think, struggle with that transition from stirring the pot themselves, right? And tasting and going, oh, no one else could possibly make it as good as me. Well, if that's the case, you don't have a business, and you don't have a scalable business. It must be able to be replicated by someone else, or you can't grow. You will be your own worst enemy and hold your own company back, right?
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So I think that relationships are really important, and both with everyone, with even your packaging producer, your designer, your distributors, everyone, the people who make your cartons, the
right.
the stores, everyone. And then really looking at how you can expand your model. So for me, I think what COVID has shown, I was very fortunate that almost 92% of my business, or majority, pretty much all of my business was in the retail supply space. And we've been very lucky that retail has not been impacted terribly, but I had full intentions that food service supply would represent 40% of my business, and that's been a long-term goal. But 2 years ago, when I was supposed to be exhibiting at a food service exhibition and chasing that business, COVID started. So, but when I look at others that have just suffered so terribly because all their eggs are in one basket, and that's a dangerous tactic and strategy to take. So I think it's also important to balance your business across multiple sectors, so that we're a bit more COVID pandemic proof.
Yeah.
So that we have the opportunity to supply multiple markets. It's important. Spread your business, spread your risk. Subcontracting is excellent. It does have its risks to some extent, but what it does allow you to do, it all depends on where your passion lies as well. For me, it's in product innovation. I love to innovate, and I love to look at trends and new ingredients and what's happening in the world, and think of what products that I could launch onto the market. So I've got lots and lots of ideas, that I don't have enough money to launch, but one day that'll happen. But so looking at where, there's those that like you're building a factory. That's amazing. But I can't imagine anything more terrifying for me, because I have no desire to operate a factory, because I suppose that, I don't want to be locked into any sort of production process. So maximum flexibility, spread your risk, and you should be good to go.
Awesome. So, Nicole, thank you so much. I mean, the kind of detailed responses which you have given are, I could see that passion within you for the brand, for the industry. So really appreciate that. And thank you so much once again for joining me on this show today.
It's a pleasure. It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me and listening. I talk a lot, in case you hadn't figured that out.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. We'll talk again soon. Take care. Merry Christmas.
Take care. Merry Christmas to you as well. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.